Welcome to the Worcester Senior Center. Today we're celebrating, well, all month, we're celebrating Black History Month. Thank you so much for coming. Today we are honored to welcome Gloria Hall, preservationist and public art administrator. Gloria has had a transformational impact on Worcester's culture landscape and is widely recognized. She will speak about the Mechanics Hall Portrait Project that introduced 3 new portraits of African Americans, entrepreneurs, abolitionists, women's rights activists from the 19th century, now in its Great Hall Gallery. Gloria will also speak on Lift Every Voice and Sing, a visual arts project. That particular piece of art is located in front of Classroom A, so please check that out. It is a new addition to all of our beautiful art here at the Worcester Senior Center. Welcome, Gloria Hall.
Thank you, Suki. Good morning. The sound vibrations of good morning are so uplifting and refreshing. Can we all say, good morning? Good morning. All right. Thank you all very much for coming out on this very cold winter's day. It is indeed a pleasure to be here and present on 2 projects that I hold near and dear, Lift Every Voice and Sing and the Mechanics Hall Portrait Project. I have a surprise guest, James Goldsberry, the founder and CEO of Next Up to Lead. The company provides coaching and training for new managers and individuals transitioning to new leadership roles. James is also the great-great-grandson of William and Martha Brown, whose portraits are now joined that of many others actively involved in the activities and mission of Mechanics Hall in the 1850s. I will continue the tradition and begin the program with Lift Every Voice and Sing. I will follow with an historical context preamble, after which James will begin the discussion of the portrait project with a presentation about his family. I will then return to complete the presentation. I know it's a lot, but if there are questions, please hold them until the end. 35 years after the abolishment of slavery in the U.S., composer, lawyer, and civil rights activist James Weldon Johnson wrote a majestic and mighty freedom anthem. At the time, Johnson was living in his hometown of Jacksonville, Florida, and was the principal of Stanton High School. His brother, Rosamond Johnson, a classically trained composer, was the music supervisor of the school's district. They initially wrote the song to commemorate Abraham Lincoln's birthday for his school's assembly. It was performed, I imagine, to a thunderous applause by his 500 students on Monday, February 12, 1900. That song, Lift Every Voice and Sing, would go on to be performed at high schools throughout the state and around the country. In 1919, the NAACP adopted the song as a Negro national anthem and used it throughout its civil rights campaigns in the 50s and 60s. In the 60s and 70s, Black radio stations such as Wild in Boston closed out their programming playing Ken Weston's recorded versions of the song. Beginning on the 100th anniversary of Lift Every Voice and Sing, I worked with visual and performing artists and community members to create various interpretations of the hallowed song. For the first project, I collaborated with visual artist Tori Cole and Wasini Kozaroff-Warkey and 15 youth from the John Street Church Choir and 15 seniors from the African American Seniors Group here at the center. Tori worked with youth on the first verse and with the seniors on the third verse. The youth and seniors' contributions were words and drawing of images that the song's lyric inspired. While the youth spoke of new day dawning, angels, and celebrating, The elders spoke of the acacia trees native to a number of African countries, the Middle Passage, unity, and liberty. Both groups spoke of love, faith, and hope. I have found there are always gems that come out as I work closely with individuals on any project. For this project, I hope to always remember the words spoken by World War II veterans, Mr. Nelson Ambush and Mr. Lewis Shropshire. Quote, "Upon my return from the war, dressed in my uniforms, I saluted when I heard the Star-Spangled Banner. But when I heard lift every voice and sing, my chest broadens. Hearing those words said to me I was working in purpose." This is the one that the seniors did, working with Tori. And that piece is actually now the one that's hanging in the center here. The second verse speaks of the determination, promise, hope, and resilience to live in spite of the cruelty of slavery and in its aftermath. The verse was interpreted by Ethiopian American artist Wasini Khosrow-Waki. The images were integrated into an exhibit with multiple works on loan from Louisiana-based artist Malika Favorite. All were installed and displayed for a month in an empty storefront of the now demolished Fashion Outlet Mall. These were some of the images from that show. Malika does her work on tin. She used a lot of tin in her work. She did a lot of images. These were just some. I went down, she was at the time living in Atlanta, and I went down and picked out some pieces and included them in the show. Freedom is woven in the interstitial fabric of our being. In the midst of presenting the African American Festival Enslaved in the Americas, I touched 100-year-old neck and leg shackles, deeds handing down generations of human capital, bills of sales transferring ownership of men, women, and children. I read tales of captured men, women, and children, made to traverse miles to the shore, some at the last minute rescued by family and community, who purchased them from their captors, while countless others continued the walk through the door of no return, onto the decks and into the bowels of ships that took them to lands far, far away, and a future of hot and cold days and nights without familiar sounds, sights, tastes, daily routines, gathering places, and the warmth of family, friend, community, and home. Now, I want you to imagine, it is the 1800s. You are a young person new to Massachusetts, just off the ship from Antigua. Although you are brought here in chains, freedom embers dwell within. What do you do? In 1732, Governor Jean Pierre, New France, Ontario, enslaved a black freedom seeker who had arrived from New England on the basis that a black is a slave wherever he may be found. A Canadian Code Noir from 1743 said, "The runaway slave shall have his ears cut off and shall be branded on the shoulder. On the third offense, he shall suffer death." The importation of Africans all over into the New England states would become illegal in 1784 and in Canada in 1807. Additionally, and more importantly, importation would not abolish enslavement in these states. It would be 1853 when the last New England state, New Hampshire, ends enslavement. What do you do? You have faith, hope, and promise. You resist. You resist in not so obvious and obvious ways. As much as possible, you retain cultural traditions such as retaining your name, participatory verbal and spiritual emotional responses in religious setting, tribal markings, and religiously the belief in transmigration. You use one or two means of manumission: run away, use of any applicable laws, or commit the ultimate religious escape, suicide, to go back to your ancestral home. Between 1700 and 1789, there are over 800 escape posted in New England newspapers. The sites of escapes for the runaways in order of greatness to least were overwhelmingly in Massachusetts, Connecticut, New Hampshire, and Rhode Island. Knowing this history, as I read and thought about these escape attempts, I kept asking myself, where were they going? These 800s were farmers, maids, seamstress, bakers, barbers who lived with faith, hope, and the promise of freedom. After initially being free, Margaret Tulip was re-enslaved in Lexington, Massachusetts, with the understanding that she would be freed in 1744 at the age of 22. Needless to say, that did not happen. Beginning in 1768, she filed a number of lawsuits to secure her freedom, finally winning in 1770. August 12, 1746. Last Thursday, April 11, 1746, evening, a very surprising tragedy was acted here in the following manner. A Negro fellow at the North End and a Negro woman belonging to a gentleman at the North End of the town, having contracted an intimate and strict friendship together, and understanding that the wretch was about to be sold into the country, they resolved to put an end to their lives rather than be parted. And accordingly, about 7 o'clock, the wretch being in the house of her countryman, they went upstairs into the garret, where the fellow, as is supposed, cut the wretch's neck with a razor, and then shot himself with a gun prepared for the purpose. They were both found lying upon the bed. These freedom fighters helped pave the way for countless others to actively seek freedom from the oppression of slavery for themselves and their brethren. In 2019, the Mechanics Hall's the executive director, Kathleen Gagney, and the board began a portrait project to recognize African American abolitionists, entrepreneurs, and family, active during the mid to late 19th century. The period of focus represented is the darkest, while at the same time enlightened times in American history. For it was a time when blacks freed or enslaved were the least legislatively protected. The Dred Scott decision and the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850 declared any person of African descent was ineligible for citizenship, could be captured, declared a fugitive, and returned to slavery. The North Star of the Times, it was during this period that the moral depravity and inhumanity of slavery was recognized and abolished. The portraits subjects were Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, and Martha Tulip Brown. Let's welcome James Goldsberry, a descendant of the Tulip and Brown family, whose family portraits now hang in Mechanics Hall Great Gallery.
Thank you, Gloria Hall and the Worcester Senior Center leadership for inviting me here this morning. I'm often asked, where are you from? Massachusetts, I say. They say, no, where are you from before that? I say, well, I typically get a quizzical look when I say, Massachusetts. I say, we've lived here for over 300 years, spanning 9 generations, going back to a time when this area was a British colony. While not uncommon for a black family to have a long-time New England roots, What is uncommon is to have quite a bit of documentation on the history of the family. There are over 750 family artifacts held at Worcester's American Antiquarian Society, an additional set at Clark University, and documents found in the Massachusetts Supreme Court archives, which have been studied and chronicled in books and papers. In the spring of last year, as a clear symbol of inclusion and belonging, an overt statement, a clear symbol of inclusion and an overt statement of belonging, Mechanics Hall in Worcester added a series of portraits of Black Americans to the Great Hall Gallery, including Frederick Douglass, Sojourner Truth, and William and Martha Brown, my great-great-grandparents. Today, I'm proud to share stories about our family in the context of some of the pivotal milestones of inclusion in our country. Worcester's portion of the story starts with a single mother, Alice Moore Brown, moving her 2 teenage children to Worcester in 1841. But let's start in the middle with one of those children, William Brown, a free man and successful businessman. William Brown had apprenticed with a large upholstery firm in Boston. He leveraged a follow-on apprenticeship in Worcester to build a successful upholstery business located at the Central Exchange Building on Main Street, and emerged as a leader in the Black community of the city. He and his wife Martha participated in the Underground Railroad and used the financial success of their business to support integration and social reform. Found in the archives was a letter dated 1880 from Elizabeth Comstock, a Quaker minister, social reformer, abolitionist, and worker for social welfare, which acknowledged the impact they had on the efforts. Your valuable package was received today. We thank you in the name of the destitute ones. The refugees still continue to come in, about 500 to 600 a week. His connection to the Worcester County Mechanics Association started when he was awarded a diploma for upholstery in the 1849 fair. He would later become the first Black member of the association in 1867 and supported some of the association's core initiatives such as abolition and women's rights. His talents extended beyond his trade, as evident by 2 patents he received, one for a sofa bed and a second for a fruit picker. The fruit picker was advertised in the Scientific American and generated a request for rights to produce the device. Martha Tulip Lewis Brown, a free woman, was a widow when she met William and likely brought funds to their marriage that contributed financially to the success of their upholstery business. She was the first Black woman member of the Ladies' Benevolent Society of the First Unitarian Church of Worcester and was partner in their work in the Underground Railroad. It's pretty cool to have William and Martha's portrait hung at the same time as Frederick Douglass, as they were friends and hosted him at their home on Palmer Street in Worcester. Upon Martha's death, Frederick Douglass sent a condolence note to William. I had few friends of the early times who I remember more vividly, and may I say lovingly, than your dear departed wife. Martha was a talented poet, as evident from the works in her commonplace book, penned in the years after her first husband died. There was an event at the Antiquarian Society where several poets read works inspired by the works of Martha. Our family is honored to have the legacy of William and Martha Brown and their connection and impact on Worcester recognized with the installation of an 11-foot-high portrait hung in the Great Hall of Mechanics Hall. We were fortunate that my dad, Dr. John J. Goldsberry Jr., was able to make his way up to the balcony at age 93 to see the portrait before he passed away last summer. Let's turn the clock back a bit further and look at some key figures in the family prior to William and Martha. On Martha's side, we can trace back to her great-grandmother, Margaret Tulip, a name that Gloria had mentioned earlier, a descendant of a slave with indigenous background. Margaret, sold as a slave at 3 weeks old, was granted her freedom at 22, only to be re-enslaved in 1767 by William Muzzy, an affluent resident of Lexington. In 1768, she sued in court and eventually won the case, remaining a free woman for the rest of her life. Perhaps further motivation for her lawsuit was the ever-potential threat to sell her children. Identified by the American Antiquarian Society was an advertisement in the Boston Gazette and Country Journal dated September 9, 1765, for the sale of a boy referencing Amos Muzzy, William Muzzy's father. While the advertisement cannot be definitively linked to her son Peter, it is symbolic of the harsh environments of the time. Massachusetts did not abolish slavery until 1783. And the 13th Amendment in 1865, abolishing slavery, was almost 100 years after her court victory. Margaret was included last year on a monument in Lexington, Massachusetts, directly across from the Lexington Battle Green, recognizing historic women of Lexington. My sisters, Yvonne Goldsberry, president of the Endowment for Health in New Hampshire, and Carol Tucker, an emergency planning and response branch manager at the EPA in Boston, attended the unveiling last year. William Brown's grandfather, John Moore Sr., fought as a patriot in the Revolutionary War, and around 1800 was given Seaman's Papers, a document for the relief and protection of American seamen. It states he was a citizen of the United States of America and ought to be respected accordingly in his person and property at all times by land and sea in prosecution of his lawful concerns. This document was issued by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts about 70 years before the 14th Amendment, granting citizenship to all those born in the U.S. With this, he sailed to Nova Scotia and Spain before settling back in Boston. Can you imagine some of the obstacles he faced? Shown is a book entitled Blackjacks, which chronicles African American seamen in the age of sail, giving insights to their experience. I'd recommend this as a read if you're interested in learning more. John Moore Sr.'s daughter, Alice Moore Brown, was that single mom in the story. She and her husband, John Brown, had 5 children, 3 who died before the age of 10. John Brown died at 38 when William was 5 and his brother Frederick was 3. Prior to moving to Worcester in 1841, Alice raised the boys with the help of her brother, John Moore Jr., who had a successful business as a barber in Boston. He stepped in as guardian for William and his brother Frederick and was likely a role model for William's future business success. John Moore Jr.'s portrait hangs in the main reading room of the American Antiquarian Society. Turning the clock forward, William and Martha had one son, Charles Brown, who continued the family business and made many contributions to Worcester, including the leather doors at the entrance of the Worcester Art Museum and draping of several of the city's theaters. Can you imagine the dinner conversations the Browns had with their son Charles about their ancestors' efforts to establish freedom and citizenship? I imagine it included the tremendous growth of inclusion and belonging over their lifetime, but highlighted the steep climb still ahead. Charles would also become a member of the Worcester County Mechanics Association, and continued in the family upholstery business until it closed due to competition from larger businesses, one of which was Denholm and McKay, who he joined in his later years. He was alive to see the 19th Amendment granting voting rights to women, and have his son Lemuel fight for our country in France during World War I, return safely, only to die shortly thereafter in a car accident. His two daughters would go on to live in Worcester for many years. One of his daughters, Bernice, my grandmother, an accomplished artist, would marry Dr. John J. Goldsberry Sr., a World War II veteran and longtime physician in Worcester. Dr. Goldsberry was a graduate of Howard University Medical School and Harvard University School of Public Health, and became the first black physician to have hospital admitting privileges at St. Vincent's Hospital in the early 50s. He also served as Assistant Commissioner of Public Health for the City of Worcester for several years. Bernice and John had two children who continued strong connections in Worcester. Connections to the Worcester Art Museum continue with their daughter, Patricia Goldsberry Walker. The Art Museum holds in their permanent archive collection her surrealistic drawings from the 1950s and 60s. Patricia, who was a trailblazer for black women in the arts, was, in 1951, a member of one of the first graduating classes with a concentration of art at Fisk University, who was later among the first African American women admitted to the Art Students League in New York. Our family ties to Mechanics Hall continued with Charles Brown's grandson, Dr. John Goldsberry Jr., who was a longtime trustee and honorary trustee, and Dr. Dorista Goldsberry, an honorary chair of the Portrait Project, who was executive director of the Worcester Youth Guidance Center for 11 years. As second-generation physicians in Worcester in the 60s, they witnessed huge gains in inclusion at the national level with the Civil Rights Act in 1964 and the Loving versus Brown Supreme Court ruling in 1967 supporting interracial marriage. As was the case for William and Martha, a clear symbol of belonging to Mechanics Hall for my parents was the encouragement of their son to take a position as a trustee, a position which I am proud to have started in 2022. I'm sure William and Martha would be proud of the millennials and Gen Zers who wrestle with the inclusion and belonging topics of today, such as Black Lives Matter, equal pay for women, LGBTQ rights, access to STEM education, and leadership roles for minorities. This generation of family is engaged in a wide range of roles, including engineer, doctor, epidemiologist, teacher, graphic artist, and 220 years after William's grandfather was granted his Siemens paper, a commissioned officer and pilot in the U.S. Navy. Where are you from? I'm often asked. Massachusetts, I say. No, where are you from before that? Well, in the context of our country's history and interwoven with the key milestones of inclusion, I'm from where we belong. Thank you.
So the Portrait Project at Mechanics Hall, as I mentioned earlier, Kathleen Gagney, with the executive director and the board, initiated the project in 2019. It started that they were just going to add one. They were going to add Frederick Douglass, because Frederick Douglass had a history of speaking on the stage at Mechanics Hall. And of course they were going to include the Brown, the husband. So I was brought in to be the arts administrator for the project, along with a lot of other people who were on board. And in discussion, we thought to have add some women to the project. And one of the things, like if you notice in most historical pictures, you never see the wife. I thought it was very important that the wife be included, if for no other reason that because of the nature of history at that time, if he were going to be involved with the Underground Railroad and freeing slaves, it essentially put a target on the family. And so I thought it was very important that you could show that there was that support. Besides the fact that she was very, very active in the business as well and had her own life. And other people kind of agreed, and so she was added. Sojourner Truth had spoken at the first Women's Rights Convention here in Worcester, and she spoke right across the street, but her life and her kind of future involvement and active involvement speaking came from that experience. So we thought it was important to include her as well. And so after the subjects were identified, the process was you had to bring in individuals who were going to then select the artists. And that was going to be the thing that took quite a while, even though the first part of it took a while too as well. So we brought on, let me see if I can get this, okay, panelists. We had four panelists. Kelly Morgan and Dorothea Moss. Their significance is very important. Kelly Morgan, at the time, she was actually on staff at Tufts University. But Kelly Morgan is a curator, educator, and social justice activist. She specializes in African American and visual culture. She created the first graduate certificate program with the mission of educating a new generation of arts museum curators and specialists that will bring with them into their practice anti-racist paradigms that can actively address the complexities of traditional art history, community engagement, and scholarship innovation. Dorothea Morgan was at the National Gallery. I don't know whether you have seen those portraits of President Barack Obama and his wife. She is the person who was behind that. That was her major, kind of project and significant. Those portraits kind of turned the whole portraiture on its head. Never had you seen like a formal portrait like that. Two other panelists were Toby Sisson. Toby is an artist who's associate professor and program director of studio art at Clark University. She recently had co-curated the Us, We, Them ethnicity and identity at the Worcester Art Museum. And of course, most of you know Dr. Jim Wilu. He served as the assistant curator, chief curator, and for 25 years director of the Worcester Art Museum. So these analysts, so I worked with the panelists. I sent out the call, and the call went out nationwide, actually went internationally as well, if you want to call Canada international. And so we received a submission of 44 artists, and eventually 3 artists were selected to have their work to hang in the hall. The artists were Manute Saluja of Long Island, Imo Neima from Holyoke, Massachusetts, and Brenda Zalima. I'm going to let the words of the artists speak for themselves. This is the Sojourner Truth piece, and this is the artist. She says, I'm going to let the words of the, well, that's what I said anyway. My choice to become a painter became satisfactory to me only if I find ways to give back through my work. I have enormous admiration for the abolitionist movement. Their courage, faith, persistence during the most shameful chapter in our country's history is an inspiration. I felt drawn to the project immediately. It provided the opportunity for me as an artist to be in service of a message larger than myself. As an artist with a commitment to painting portraits that celebrate history, unsung heroes, and BIPOC stories, it is my desire to create a very unique portrait, a design a portrait that is singular to Mechanics Hall, a portrait that would evoke and convey sense of Sojourner Truth's power, of her perseverance, strength, her sense of confidence, self-worth, her spirituality. This was from when the portraits were installed. This is her with the portrait after it's hung. Ima. In my work, I imagine black bodies as historical templates that appear with the intention of illuminating hidden aspects of our most significant narratives. In this way, should I be selected to create a portrait of one of these esteemed figures, I would approach my depiction from the standpoint of historical narrative, with the objective of capturing not only the physical likeness of my subject, but the significant atmosphere orbiting themes that make his or her story relevant from a historical perspective, and also accessible and poignant to a contemporary audience. These portraits should answer questions from our past and reveal truths from our future. This is from the installation piece after with the stall with the artist. Brenda, how do you say something about people you've never met, who are long dead and who live at different times? For the double portrait of William and Martha Brown, who were central figures in the Worcester community, there are few images available. So far, I have discovered none of them together. Their portraits would require the type of extensive research that I enjoy in discovering the personalities of the portrait subjects and how they might interact with each other. Iconography is powerful, and this is an exciting time for portraiture. Important histories have long been buried, that have long been buried are finally being exposed, and triumphs are being celebrated that have long been ignored. Over the past decade, I've devoted my artistic practice to the crucial work of representing men and people of color on the walls of revered public spaces. By gradually revealing William and Martha Brown's story through symbolic objects, their body language, and the expressions on their faces, I hope to inspire the viewers on their journey of discovery into the couple's historic role in Worcester. This is the delivery day. It's big. And that's finally installed. And here's she with the artist. These were a number of images from the night that of the opening. I think it was in March. The artist gave a talk. It was very well attended. So this is with the artist, myself, and of course, Kathleen and Juliet Bible, who was the person who did the moderation for it. I'll leave this one up. Let us remember the brilliance, because I haven't spoken that much about the subjects, but let us remember the brilliance and audacity of Frederick Douglass, an escaped slave, to deliver his famous "What to the Slave is the 4th of July" in 1852 to an audience that included then U.S. President Millard Fillmore, signer of the Congressional Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. As Douglass spoke and lived, one could not tell that his body wore the physical scars of bleedings and attacks from his early life as a slave. A quote from him on freedom. The silver trump of freedom has aroused my soul to external wakefulness. It now appeared to disappear no more forever. It was heard in every sound, seen in everything. It would ever present to torment me with a sense of my wretched condition. I saw nothing without seeing it. I heard nothing without hearing it, and felt nothing without feeling it. It looked from every star. It smiled in every claim, breathed in every wind, and moved in every storm. The temerity of Isabel Rambrew, or we know her as Sojourner Truth, an enslaved woman to become Sojourner Truth, an abolitionist and women's rights activist, to at the age of 53 shift her life into high gear during the 1850s and emphatically state, "I am a woman's right. The spirit calls me and I must go." The commitment of William and Martha Tulip Brown to family, community, and to live a fulfilling life. They welcomed community into their home, supported escaped slaves and formerly escaped enslaved persons, and actively engaged in community social affairs. It is my hope that the addition of these three portraits contribute to a sense of place and an affirmation of belonging for Black folks and others performing, visiting, working, and engaging with Mechanics Hall far into the future. To accommodate the three portraits, there were three portraits in Mechanics Hall that had to be taken down, and preservation work had to be done on those, and that's also part of a kind of ongoing project that Mechanics Hall is doing. But so that's the presentation, and if you have questions, I hope it has. Any questions? My high school leadership professor would say at the end of the class, she would say, questions, comments, criticisms, or profanity. So, you know.
Thank you for helping to do the work and educate us. I'm wondering if you have any information you can share about the artwork or the artist that hangs down by Classroom A now?
That's Tori Cole. She is, at the time she was in Boston, and she does a lot of work with children. She does work in oils, and I had worked with her on a project to create an image to use for the African American Festival, which the theme was always lift every voice and celebrate. She did a great image and stuff. And so when I was, had the idea for this project, I immediately thought of her and asked her to come in. She moved, and I have since lost contact with her, but she moved to Virginia. So that's it. And the kids' responses to her, it was great, to see her working with the kids and to see the response. And her working with the seniors, it was great. I referenced that, that quote from Mr. Ambush and Shropshire. One of the things that I got, because I was younger, obviously I didn't have as much gray hair as I, have now, and so I was surprised. I didn't think they thought of Africa, and I was really surprised when, when they, mention the acacia trees. I was really surprised. They mentioned the, the whole idea of the Middle Passage and that kind of thing and stuff. But it was a good time. We met with the seniors and with the students twice. She met with them. Well, we both did, twice, and and they, mentioned the words and the images that came to their mind, based on the verses and stuff. With the kids, they actually drew some little image. That sun that you see, that's one of the kids. The angels that you see, that's one of the kids. She just, enlarged it and made it bigger and stuff. The elderly weren't into painting or drawing, they just, gave their words of what to include. But the group included, it was those two, Eleanor Holly, and I'm not remembering, and I nowhere did I document who all the seniors were, but those were the three that I remember that were involved. But it was 15 seniors that were involved in the project, and it was good. Yeah.
I recognize your name from all of the wonderful work you've done over the years, like Art in the Heart.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your installation in Oxford.
Yeah.
What is your background? I'm embarrassed to say I don't know your background.
Well, my background. I mean, sure. You mean like where I'm from, or how did I get here? How did I get to this?
Yeah.
Well, let me see. What can I say? Well, okay. So, my undergraduate degree. I don't have an art history. I don't have an art degree background. My degree is in sociology. I always was interested in people. When I was in Boston, one of the jobs that I had in real estate, I was assistant property manager in real estate for this building that was on Boylston Street. And one of the tenants was First Night. And so they asked me if I would be a manager for some of their events. And I don't know whether you know First Night in Boston. First Night in Boston was huge, and so art posters and stuff like that was all a part. And I just, so I just gravitated to that. I liked the art. Growing up, when I was in high school, I took art, when I was in high school, and I liked the pictures and that kind of stuff. So that was always just there. And yeah, so I mean, so it was like, so you had that. I worked in real estate for a number of years. I did management at Old Shrewsbury Village and stuff. And when I was at Old Shrewsbury Village, one of the things that I would do is I would bring in events. So I brought in artists, I brought in performers, that kind of stuff. So, and when I left that and I was home, anyway. So one of the things that I always reference is that I will say to folks, when I was a kid and growing up, we were talking about what it is that we were going to be. I grew up in the country, so we're like, I'm out in the country. I grew up with my grandmother, my great-grandmother, so you got, my grandmother was 70 years older than me. God knows how old my great-grandmother was. And, so we were talking about what it is that you're going to be. I said an architect. I don't know where it came from. That kind of thing, an architect. And so I just kind of say that art is within the interstitial of my being. That's just what it is that I'm supposed to be. And I follow where the Spirit leads me. And that's literally how I end up doing these projects and that kind of stuff. And yes, I do have experience, but yeah, so I follow. So,
You have a real talent.
yes, thank you.
My question to you is, do you think that the Mechanics Hall might do some more portraits?
I'm sorry?
They might add some other portraits throughout the building.
Will there be other portraits
Yes.
added? No. You know, I mean, in order to add those, I mean, as I said, they had to take 3 down. And
Yeah.
really adding the 3 portraits, it actually completes the story. Because all of the images that are there, or the portraits there, are all people that were kind of involved with abolitionists. They were been mechanics, but there were never any things that were there weren't any that were coming from the perspective of African Americans. You know, I think I always say that they were the people that they were all, you know, making all these speeches in and about. It's like, you know, so finally you have some, you know, black folks that are on the wall, so like that. So it kind of completes the story.
Oh, okay. I just thought that there are so many other outstanding people that they might have some more.
Yeah, yeah.
throughout the building.
Oh, yeah, there are a lot. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. You were going to ask something?
Just want to say thank you, but tagging off of what she said, this is going to make every time I go to Mechanics Hall better, because now I'll be able to appreciate all of the art more. So
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I have another question.
Okay.
Thank you. I remember when they were talking about doing that, taking down the 3 portraits was very controversial. It took up a lot of space in the newspaper, people upset about that.
Yeah.
And how did you get that resolved, and where are those 3 portraits now? Because
You would ask me that.
and who are they?
I don't remember who they are. But they are, there's a term in museums, deassessing. So they're looking for places in order to house them. They're now in storage. Well, there's restoration work that's being done to some of those that needed to have work done to them. But we're actively looking for places to put them. Right now, they're in storage.
How did, not you, but how did the
How did
decision
it-
which ones to take down, how was that made?
Kind of those individuals who were the least kind of significant to. No. I don't mean. I don't know what other way to say it.
Right.
To the story, and you know. So,
Hi, Gloria. If I could add,
ahead.
I'm still on the board, but I was on the board toward the very end of, you know, how do you select which portraits come down?
Yeah.
And when she says least significant, it's least significant to Worcester.
Right.
Not necessarily least significant to the U.S. history or to their accomplishments.
Yeah.
They really wanted the portraits to have some significant tie to Worcester. So, for instance,
okay.
President Garfield came down. I recently read a history of President Garfield. He's tremendous history, tremendous proponent of abolition and freedom and whatnot, which is why he was up there in the first place. But he did not have a really strong connection to
Worcester.
Worcester. So I think that was the tiebreaker when they went to it.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Sandra. My question is, I enjoyed the presentation, but I was wondering why it's all about slavery and where we came from and not how far we have come. I am an African American. I'm very proud of my African descent. As you can see, I'm wearing my head wrap.
Yeah.
But, you know, like, why is it always about slavery? We were enslaved, but we were never slaves. We were never born slaves.
When I'm doing a presentation about historical things, I provide historical context.
Yes, ma'am.
So it wasn't, my focus wasn't about
slavery itself. It wasn't about slavery itself.
No,
It
it was.
how far they came in slavery.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
because in order for, like when I did that kind of what was supposed to be an exercise where it had you to think about what it was that they were up against,
Yes.
and what did they do when I said they resisted, and different ways in which they resisted. I always include that in there. I don't just
Yeah.
say just that.
They
you know.
persevered. Very
Yeah,
persevered.
yeah. It's
Very
like, you
proud
know,
of that.
and talking about and saying how, what they had to persevere,
Yeah.
One of the things that I say in it is that I think that, freedom is within our interstitial, the fabric of who it is that we are. Everybody has that. It's like you aren't born to be, enslaved, not born to be hampered. I mean,
Yeah.
have you ever seen a baby like this? No, they come out, they're like, and kids are, they're like, they're free. It's just what happens after we are here.
Yeah.
And stuff. So, so I just think that that is just within our interstitial part of who it is of all humanity, all humans and stuff. And and that is one of the things that I think kind of helps to to guide you to freedom, to guide you to resistance, because that's not your natural state of being, to be enslaved. So.
I
hope
was
that
just,
answers.
at some point that they can tell the story of how far we've come. We even have a black president, so it should be acknowledged also in Black history.
Yeah, I mean, that could be, that's a presentation for another day. I mean,
Yes,
you know what I
ma'am.
mean? It's like, and stuff, so, yeah.
Thank you.
What was your?
Would some of that be what she just mentioned? Worcester only, okay, well, Worcester African American, would that be in the Worcester Historical Museum?
The Worcester Historical Museum is going to have, artifacts from, if people give them artifacts, and they will focus on the histories around those artifacts. And so, I mean, right, so, yeah, so. I see Shirley Carter here. Yeah. One of the projects that I also did was I did an oral history project where I interviewed people who had been involved with civil rights in Worcester. And Shirley was one of the participants from she and her sister when they integrated the nursing school and stuff. So Worcester has I don't know what you call it, rich, but Worcester has it has history in around civil rights and things like that. So yeah. Thank you all again.